Growing up, my life was a constant struggle, primarily due to my neglectful and overbearing stepmother. Her behavior turned our household into a nightmare, making every day unbearable. Now that my father has decided to divorce her, she is desperately trying to convince him to reconsider his decision. However, I stood firm, telling her that it was too late to change his mind. Being an only child in a home where my parents openly despised one another was incredibly challenging. Their frequent and intense arguments were a regular part of our lives, with one of them often storming out in a car after a heated dispute. These arguments were not only emotionally draining but also deeply hurtful. Although neither of my parents ever took their anger out on me physically, they consistently vented their frustrations about each other onto me. I became a constant witness to their incessant bickering, and truthfully, no child should ever have to endure that kind of tension. Divorce was a topic that seemed to surface in almost every argument, one of the most commonly used words in their exchanges. Strangely enough, I found myself secretly hoping they would actually go through with their talks about separation. It wasn't because I didn't love my parents, I genuinely did, but because I believed they both deserved to find happiness and peace away from each other. The toxic environment created by their relentless conflict made me yearn for a resolution that would allow each of them to pursue individual happiness and tranquility. One evening, during dinner, my parents sat me down to share some unsettling news. They urged me not to get upset, explaining that they had exhausted all efforts to make things work. Then, they delivered the bombshell: they were getting a divorce. I simply responded with a nonchalant, "Oh, okay," and continued eating. To my surprise, instead of understanding my reaction, both of them broke down in tears. They accused me of being insensitive and questioned whether I had any feelings about their decision. According to them, it was unimaginable for someone not to react emotionally to their divorce. Honestly, I didn't care much because I knew this was an inevitable outcome. So, I just kept eating. Soon after, my father moved out, and I continued to live with my mother. The divorce proceedings dragged on for months, with a new arrangement where I would live with my father on weekends and with my mother during the weekdays. Eventually, their divorce was finalized, and they went their separate ways. They made an effort to remain polite with each other for the sake of co-parenting me, but everything changed when my stepmother, Abigail, entered my father's life. It became quite apparent that she and my father had been having an affair long before the divorce was even considered. Since she was his co-worker and knew a lot about me, I decided to confront her about it. She admitted, with a smug expression, that she had been sleeping with my father 6 months before the divorce. She explained how she had sensed my father's unhappiness and reached out to him, suggesting they go out for coffee to provide emotional support. While her intentions might have been well-meaning, my father is an introvert with few friends, so he accepted her invitation, and that's how their affair began. Although I wanted my parents to find happiness, I also recognized that the affair was wrong. However, I couldn't bring myself to tell my mother because it would only hurt her further. I cherished the time I spent with my father on weekends, but things took a turn for the worse when he started going out on weekends to spend time with Abigail. He would leave with a babysitter until around 10 or 11 p.m., and I would wait for him to return because we had a tradition of him tucking me in, especially since I was still a child at the time. He often came home drunk, making excuses about being stuck at work, which we both knew were lies. Sometimes, he would even sneak Abigail into the house when he thought I was asleep. It felt strange, but I learned to accept it. After about a year, Abigail moved in with us, and the first thing she did was remove all photos of me and my father from the living room. This move struck me as odd. She told my father that the living room should feature pictures of nature and other such themes instead of family photos. She also changed my bedroom while I was away. When I returned one weekend, I found that everything in my room had been transformed into beige and neutral colors. I was furious and made it clear to her that this was my space and that I was my father's daughter. She responded by saying she disliked how ugly and childish my room looked, so she had taken the liberty to change it. When I cried and informed my father about the situation, he and Abigail had a fight. She yelled at me, telling me to stay with my mother if I had so many issues, and insisted that she and my father should start a new life together without me. I threw a tantrum in response, but I realized then that she was going to despise me forever, and she indeed did. One weekend, while my mother was dropping me off at my father's place, he informed us that he and Abigail had gotten married that week. It was a last-minute decision that shocked us all, especially since Abigail had never bothered to talk to my mother or even acknowledge her presence before. Despite this, she had now become a part of our family. That night, my father organized a dinner party for his friends to celebrate his wedding. During the party, I overheard Abigail, who was quite drunk, telling her friends how much she hated that my father had a daughter. She expressed a wish that their affair had come to light during my parents' divorce so that my mother would have primary custody, ensuring that I would never visit my father again. This revelation broke my heart because I couldn't understand what I had done to make her hate me so intensely. A few months later, my father announced that he had accepted a new job position that was 2 hours away from my mother's place. This news infuriated my mother because she now had to drive such a long distance to drop me off at his place. She expressed her frustration every time she questioned him about the move. It was then that my father revealed that his new job would pay him 3 times more than his current one. Feeling guilty about living so far away from me, my parents discussed the situation and ultimately decided that I would start living with my father since he was moving to a better district with much improved schools. I didn't like this decision at all because I already had friends at my current school, but my father convinced me by emphasizing the advantages of attending a high-end school with better opportunities. Despite my initial reluctance, I eventually agreed to move in with him. The transition to my father's new place was fraught with challenges. The increased distance between my parents' homes made it harder for my mother to visit me, but they both believed it was the best decision for my future since I was attending a superior school. My father's new job was demanding. He would wake up at 6 a.m., leave by 8 a.m., and not return until 8 p.m. This meant he had little awareness of what was happening between me and Abigail. At the time of the move, I was about to start 10th grade, a particularly challenging period compounded by the fact that I was entering a new school after everyone had already formed friendships in 9th grade. Being naturally reserved and introverted, much like my father, I struggled to make new friends. Additionally, I was dealing with severe insomnia, likely due to anxiety, which made it difficult to sleep until the early hours of the morning. This led to occasional missed bus rides. Unfortunately, Abigail was always unwilling to drive me to school, forcing me to walk 2 miles, which often made me even later than I already was. While missing the bus was entirely my fault, I still wished she would show some compassion when I was clearly struggling. Abigail also refused to cook for me except for dinners when she knew my father would be home, allowing her to present herself as a good person in front of him. This was the exact time when I started consuming a lot of junk food, buying it with the lunch money my father would leave for me every day. It was evident that I was not doing well, and instead of helping me, Abigail made fun of me, calling me names like pig, and suggesting that I was inviting bullying. She wouldn't assist me with homework or answer any questions I had, stating that she was not my mother. I found myself eagerly waiting for my father to come home, knowing that she would treat me normally then. If I didn't make my bed perfectly or if, in her view, there was dust on my study table, even though I cleaned it regularly, she would yell at me. When I cried because of her yelling, my father would tell me that if I didn't like it, I should just move back in with my mother because I was being bratty. Every day, she would remind me that this was not her house, making me feel like a mere guest. As you can imagine, I was sinking into depression and anxiety, experiencing panic attacks. No one seemed to understand what I was going through. My father was too busy to recognize the truth, and I was afraid to tell my mother, fearing it would spark another major fight between my parents. Eventually, the situation with Abigail became unbearable, and I decided to run away to my mother's place. I had been saving up money that my grandparents had given me for Christmas, so I booked a bus ticket and packed a few belongings to leave. When I arrived at my mother's doorstep, she was shocked to see me. My parents had been frantically trying to reach me, calling everyone they knew. I cried and hugged my mother, finally feeling like I was back home. She immediately sensed that something was wrong and, upon learning about Abigail's treatment of me, my parents had a huge fight. My father refused to accept that Abigail had been mistreating me, insisting that I was just overreacting, which made me cry even more. When my mother threatened to take legal action, my father finally listened to her. He promised to talk to Abigail and get to the bottom of the situation. As you can imagine, my father confronted Abigail and discovered that she hadn't been providing me with any food while he was out. He was furious and yelled at her repeatedly. I'm not sure exactly what happened next, but the following weekend, my father came to pick me up, telling me that Abigail was very sorry and that this behavior would never happen again. My mother warned him, and my father assured us that she would improve. It seemed like my father had a serious conversation with her because Abigail never bothered me about the food issue again. She would cook for me begrudgingly but otherwise ignored me completely, as if I didn't exist. To be honest, I actually preferred this because it allowed me to coexist with her in the same house without constant conflict. We had a few minor fights here and there, but it was manageable. Eventually, I managed to complete high school and moved away to attend college. My father kept urging me to choose a college in his city, but I knew I needed to distance myself from him and his wife. We barely stayed in contact because I refused to visit him during holidays, which saddened my father. He would tell me that I should be a better daughter and that other children regularly visited their fathers, but the truth was that staying away allowed me to see how deeply depressed I had been while living with Abigail. My mind could finally process the difficulties I had faced, and seeing my father with her again would only bring me down, something I didn't want. As a result, I grew closer to my mother, who regularly checked up on me, and I visited her whenever I had time off from college. When I graduated, both my father and mother were there to cheer me on. I was looking forward to having a normal dinner with my parents, just like any other child, but my father informed us that he had to drive back home because Abigail didn't like eating alone. This was disappointing, but I had learned not to argue with him about Abigail, so I kept quiet. In the following years, I secured a job and eventually met my current partner, Michael. His entrance into my life brought about a positive transformation. His love and support had a profound impact on me, bringing joy and a sense of completeness that I had been missing. Michael has a great relationship with my mother and has met my father once or twice. Even on those rare occasions, he expressed his disapproval of how my father treated me and prioritized his wife over me. For instance, once when Michael came to visit me with Abigail, I had planned the entire day to show my father around my city. I shared these plans with Michael over the phone, but Abigail overheard and began complaining that she wasn't in the mood to go anywhere. She insisted that she and my father should spend romantic time together and that he could meet me later for dinner. My father tried to explain that they had come solely to see me, but Abigail was adamant, saying that he never took time off work and should spend the day with her, planning to meet me in the evening. I didn't want to interfere between them, so I kept quiet and accepted her plans. Last year, during my birthday, my father sent me flowers and ordered a special dish for me. For context, I've been a vegetarian my entire life, and everyone knows about it. While the flowers were beautiful, I was shocked to see that the dish was beef. Both Michael and I were at a loss for words, thinking maybe the restaurant had messed up the order. When I called my father to ask about it, he immediately started telling me that I should thank Abigail for being so thoughtful, as she had apparently ordered the dish for me. Taking a deep breath, I realized that Abigail was behind this. I told my father that she had ordered beef for me, despite knowing that I was a vegetarian. My father went silent, and I could hear him asking Abigail to confirm what she had done. Abigail justified her actions by saying she thought my boyfriend could eat it if I didn't like it, so I shouldn't complain about the gift. I was furious hearing her reasoning. In my frustration, I told my father that this was supposed to be my birthday gift and that it was ridiculous for her to send me something she knew I wouldn't like. This sparked a heated argument between us, with my father trying to convince me that Abigail didn't have any ulterior motives and that I should at least thank her. I refused, saying that I never asked for the dish and thus shouldn't feel obligated to thank her. To add fuel to the fire, Abigail started crying beside my father, accusing me of being ungrateful and labeling me as a spoiled brat. I ended the call in anger because I didn't want to say something I might regret. That night, my father texted me to apologize for what had happened. To be honest, I didn't care much about the gift itself, but it hurt that my father didn't show enough love by sending me something I would actually appreciate. He expected me to thank his wife, who had been the source of so much pain in my life. Since then, I've barely spoken to my father. Michael has been a constant source of support because he understands how wrong it was for my father and Abigail to treat me this way. My father would call occasionally, but I would only speak to him for a few minutes each time. This strained relationship persisted for quite some time until last week, when I received a voice note from my father saying he wanted to talk about something urgent. Thinking it was an emergency, I called him and he informed me that he had decided to leave Abigail. I was shocked because I never expected my father to have the courage to leave her. He explained that he had been contemplating it for a long time and that he hadn't been happy for a while. He expressed his desire to remain alone and travel the world, which didn't seem like a sufficient reason to me. So, I pressed him for more details, asking if there were any major issues in his marriage. After some persuasion, he finally opened up about the real reason behind his decision. He revealed that Abigail's infertility issues had been driving her to the brink of insanity. She would vent her frustration on my father daily, accusing him of not being man enough to make her pregnant and threatening to cheat on him if he didn't give her a child. He told me that he was too tired and old to go through all of this turmoil and simply wanted a peaceful life. I understood where he was coming from, having seen him work so hard his entire life. Unlike my friends, I never had to take on any debt for college because my father had always provided for me financially and materially. He deserved peace and happiness at his age, so I assured him that whatever he chose to do, I would support him. He thanked me for my support and mentioned that he had also talked to my mother about his decision. Over the years, my parents had developed a good friendship and had been there for each other through tough times like this. Last night, as I was about to go to bed, I started receiving calls from Abigail. Naturally, I didn't answer, but she kept calling. Realizing that I wasn't picking up, she started calling Michael in frustration. Eventually, I answered her call and could hear her sniveling and crying on the other end. She began by informing me that my father had decided to leave her, dropping the bombshell as if expecting me to be devastated. To her surprise, I remained calm. She asked if I already knew about it, but I stayed silent. Then she started bombarding me with questions, asking if my father was cheating on her and urging me to spill the truth. Unable to hold back a snicker, I bluntly told her that if she suspected anything, she should confront my father directly. I didn't mince words when I reminded her of the audacity it took for her to question my father's fidelity, especially considering that she herself had been having an affair with him during my parents' marriage. This infuriated her, and she raised her voice, accusing me of being heartless and insensitive. I calmly expressed that I honestly didn't care about their divorce. What mattered to me was that my father was finally leaving her, and I was happy that karma had caught up with her. She continued to cry and scream, trying to guilt-trip me by claiming how much she had done for me over the years and insisting that as her stepdaughter, I should feel some obligation and loyalty to her. She argued that the least I could do was talk to my father and offer suggestions to salvage their relationship. In response, I let her know that their relationship was none of my business and that I had no intention of meddling or offering any advice. I told her that she had done absolutely nothing for me except cause me trauma, depression, and anxiety, and therefore, she shouldn't expect my loyalty. I added that I was glad she was finally going to be out of my father's life, as well as all of ours. Since then, my stepmother has been sending me nasty messages, accusing me of being a bad daughter for not trying to save my father's second marriage and suggesting that I should reason with him. This is utterly ridiculous because I have nothing to do with his decision. While I can talk to my father, I believe he is making the right choice by leaving her, as she is insufferable. However, I might be biased, which is why I'm on Reddit seeking advice for not helping my stepmother. First and foremost, I want to express my gratitude for the overwhelming support, comments, and private messages I've received since sharing my story. It's truly heartening to know that there are compassionate strangers willing to offer their perspectives and guidance on this matter. Now, to address some developments since my initial post, I've had conversations with both Michael and my mother about the situation with Abigail. It turns out they share the same sentiment that my decision not to intervene in my father's impending divorce is the right one. Michael, especially, has been a pillar of support throughout this ordeal. He reassured me that my well-being is paramount and that I shouldn't feel obligated to fix a marriage that has long been plagued by toxicity. My mother, while understanding my hesitation, has encouraged me to inform my father about Abigail's harassing messages and provide him with screenshots as evidence. Despite the strained relationship I've had with my father, she believes he deserves to know the truth. I'm conflicted about this because, even though I'm well aware of Abigail's manipulative behavior, I also recognize that my father is going through a difficult time. It's been a while since we were close, and I'm hesitant to disrupt him further with this news. Nevertheless, I've decided to gather the courage to have a conversation with my father in the coming days. I plan to share my concerns, the impact of Abigail's actions on my life, and the reasons behind my decision to distance myself from their relationship. It won't be an easy conversation, but I believe honesty is crucial and he deserves to know how his soon-to-be ex-wife is treating me. I will keep you all updated on how the discussion unfolds. Update 2 ***. Hi everyone, it's been a month since my last update, and a lot has transpired during this time. After my initial post, I decided to take the advice of many and talk with my father. We had a lengthy conversation about everything that had happened, and it was a revelation for both of us. First of all, my father was genuinely shocked to learn that Abigail had called me after he talked with her about the divorce. He told me that he had no idea about it since she had stormed out of the house after a screaming match. Then, I hesitantly informed him about the messages she had been sending. He was appalled and angered by her actions, particularly the vile and nasty things she had been saying to me. He insisted that I immediately send him all the screenshots, stating that he would forward them to his lawyer as they might be useful during the divorce proceedings. He also told me that he would confront her about it, assuring me that this behavior wouldn't continue. During our conversation, my father opened up about the real reasons behind Abigail's desperate attempts to salvage their relationship. It turns out that when they got married, they had signed a prenuptial agreement. My father had learned his lesson from his divorce with my mother and didn't want to go through the same ordeal again. Therefore, in the event of their divorce, Abigail would be entitled to nothing, which explains her resentment and anger. This was why Abigail was hoping that by manipulating me, she could somehow influence my father to reconsider the divorce, saving herself from financial loss. I had no prior knowledge of this prenuptial agreement and expressed my approval of his decision to protect his assets. He then explained that Abigail's entire family had been calling and abusing him for the past few days, demanding that he pay Abigail half of his assets despite the prenuptial agreement. They argued that since she had stuck by him all these years, she deserved monetary compensation. I told my father that I hoped he wouldn't succumb to their demands, pointing out that Abigail could have continued working and earning money for herself but chose instead to leave her job and stay at home the entire day for all these years. My father assured me that he wasn't going to be influenced by them and that the prenuptial agreement was ironclad anyway. We continued talking, and my father disclosed that he had moved out of their shared residence because he couldn't endure Abigail's screaming matches any longer. He was currently living in a motel, trying to find some solace away from the toxic environment. He did ask me about Michael and my work, and overall, my father seemed to be doing okay considering the circumstances. It was a relief to see that he was taking steps to free himself from an unhealthy and unhappy marriage. Update 3 ***. Hey everyone, it's been quite a ride since my last update, and I have to share a major revelation that has honestly left everyone shocked. My father recently discovered that Abigail has been cheating on him for the past year. Yep, you read that right. It turns out she's been having little rendezvous with one of her friend's husbands. Classic, right? Sometimes, reality is stranger than fiction. Apparently, Abigail would use the pretense of going out for girls' night to secretly meet up with this man. Everything came crashing down when her friend stumbled upon their chats, where Abigail was practically convincing the poor guy to leave his wife so they could be together. Furious, the friend confronted her husband about the whole mess, and he spilled the beans about the affair. The friend then drove straight to Abigail to confront her about everything. True to her character, Abigail refused to accept her mistake and instead blamed the friend for her husband's infidelity. In her anger, the friend decided to reach out to my father since she already knew they were getting a divorce. She informed my father about everything and even mentioned that she was leaving her husband after this revelation. When my father shared this bombshell with me, I was shocked but, in a strange way, not entirely surprised. Abigail also reached out to my father, attempting to justify her actions by blaming him and claiming that her infertility issues had forced her to do crazy things. However, my father doesn't care about her explanations and is having none of it. The divorce proceedings will continue as planned. Update for ***. Hello wonderful people, it's been 6 months since my last update, and this time I'm back with some positive news. My father is finally a free man, living his life and doing remarkably well after the divorce was finalized. He kicked Abigail out of his home, and we have all collectively blocked her from our lives. No more drama, no more toxic messages, just pure, blissful peace. Honestly, it feels like a tremendous weight has been lifted, and the air is clear again on the home front. Things are surprisingly harmonious now. I make it a point to regularly check up on both my parents, and it turns out that a little distance from the chaos has allowed all of us to rebuild a healthier connection. Michael and I are planning to take our parents, my folks and his, to a retreat where we can all bond and create some beautiful memories together. We want to see how well our families can gel. My parents are on board and are looking forward to this family retreat. On a more personal note, Michael and I are having serious conversations about marriage. It's an exciting prospect, and I can't help but feel a surge of joy at the thought of building a future together with him.